Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This oversight hearing on the Antonio B. Wampat International Airport Authority in conjunction with the Department of Public Works is hereby convened by the Committee on the Guam U.S. Military Buildup, Infrastructure, and Transportation. On the agenda today, in direct reference to the Wampat International Airport Authority, is the status of the Transportation Security Administration checkpoint expansion design. The secondary issue, the subsequent issue, is the status and discussion on Route 10A and relevant routes with the following agencies. This is inclusive of the Antonio B. Wampat International Airport Authority, Guam, in direct recognition that Route 10A is under the ownership of the airport facility. And the individuals that have been invited to provide testimony are Mr. Chuck Atta, the Executive Manager of GIAA, as well as a direct request for a representative from the Transportation Management Group. The second component would be our agency also invited with regards to this construction of the Department of Public Works, and the individuals invited were Mr. Glenn Leongura, Director, Department of Public Works, and Mr. Joaquin Blas, Highway Administrator, Division of Highways. Gentlemen, let me first of all, in accordance with the open government law, notification was initially sent out to the community, to our media partners, as well as to our stakeholders on the 7th of July. With the subsequent notification, the 48-hour requirement was sent out on the 12th of July, 2017. I want to thank our media partners who have shared this information and invited the public to either tune in to these respective channels that are being televised, or to be able to join us in the legislature with regards to these particular issues. Like was mentioned a little earlier, the first item on the agenda is the Wampat International Airport Authority, the status of the TSA Security Administration. The individuals that we have presently signed up, if by any chance you're going to be part of the oral presentation, I would like to invite the following individuals: Mr. Fred Topaz, Chuck Atta, Brady Nadell, Glenn Leon Guerrero, Ken Blas, and one other individual from DPW. As we proceed with the discussion, I want to thank the good Senator San Augustine. Thank you very much, Senator, for joining us this morning for this joint oversight hearing. The first item on the agenda, like was mentioned, is the status of the Transportation Security Administration, the TSA checkpoint expansion design, and this particular issue will be directed to Airport Authority Management. And I would like to request, because there was a specific request for a representative from the Transportation Management Group, if by any chance we do have a representative that will be joining us this morning.
Yes,
if you can identify yourself for the record and respond.
Hafide, good morning.
Good morning,
Senator Reagan. My name is Charles Atta, the Executive Manager for the Guam International Airport Authority. With me today I have Mr. Fred Topaz, who will be joining me at the table from the Transportation Management Group. On behalf of our Chairman, Ricardo Duenas, would like to thank the opportunity for allowing us to come down today to discuss
so
issues
just for clarification, Mr. Topaz is with the Transportation Management Group.
That is correct, sir.
He is not a member of the management team of the airport.
We consider them a member of our management team with regards to our goals and objectives with regards to our CAP projects.
Okay, no, just for the record, he is TMA rep, not GIAA management.
That is correct. He's with Transportation Management.
Just wanted that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let me start off with the questions, and Mr. Atta, I would like to direct this to yourself as well as TMG, if by any chance it would be applicable. What is the status of the TSA checkpoint expansion design and funding? And just for the information of the public, the reason this particular request has surfaced is primarily because in the 32nd Guam Legislature, Public Law 32-62, inclusive in the borrowing authority that was provided through that legislation, was the expansion of the TSA checkpoints. And over the course of the last 2 years, we've seen aggressive discussion in increasing our number of visitors and travelers coming to and from Guam. So in conjunction with that, there are other projects that you're probably going to highlight that would accommodate the increased passenger requirement as well as TSA. But this is the checkpoint where, in fact, these individuals go directly through the Wampat International Airport Authority. So please, what is the status of the TSA checkpoint expansion, design, and funding?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to the 2013 bond borrowing for the 21 projects that we identified to increase the capacity of the Guam International Airport Authority, the TSA security screening checkpoint expansion from 5 lanes to 2 lanes, from 5 lanes with additional 2, was the number 4 priority listing in the 21 projects identified with the bond borrowing. Unfortunately, and that is actually, there's actually 3 TSA projects that are of concern or of high priority. The security checkpoint expansion is 1, the baggage handling upgrade is 2, which was completed last month, and the 3rd is the international corridor, which is underway and is expected to, for completion in September of 2019. But again, that last project with the 3rd floor corridor, as if you may be aware, that actually was put out to bid twice. The first time it was put out, it was way over the government estimate. It was actually over double our estimate, so we actually had to bring that back in, make adjustments, and put it out. We recently awarded that, and again, it's underway. But again, that came at a high price tag. Inclusive of the construction and soft costs, it's roughly about $110 million, which is about almost the same amount of funding that we received from the 2013 bond sale. So again, we had to reprioritize our projects with regards to the 21 that was included with that bond sale. We do have the anticipated cost right now for the TSA expansion is about $1.3 million, 1.6, somewhere in that area. And so we're working with airline partners to see how we can leverage, some of the partnerships that we have to move forward with that funding. We are still moving forward with regards to design for that expansion. And right now, we actually, in our conceptual design, are looking at completion of sometime next year, I believe in the summertime.
So you're still proceeding with the design? Has this information been disseminated to your TSA partners?
That is correct.
And it's going to cost approximately $1.6 million. So let me ask you a question. In regards to the proceeds that were acquired through the bond, approximately $110 million given to the airport, and that's exclusive of the refinancing. Now, you just said $97 million of that has been absorbed specifically for the 3rd floor, the international travelers accommodation.
It's actually close to 110 total with regards to the soft cost of A&E, correct, for the 3rd floor corridor.
And then the 3rd floor is going to cost 110?
We're anticipating it will be 110 once completed. And that's inclusive of the construction and all soft costs associated, the A&E and construction management.
So of all the 21 projects contained in Public Law 32, that's 62, that was authorized by this body to the airport to complete those 21 projects, one project may absorb the entire bond funding?
The amount could, yes, because again, the total cost of it is 110. That's actually our primary, our priority 1 project, which was identified when we came down for the bond legislation. Again, that's a unfunded TSA.
Let me ask you a question, because when the airport comes before the legislative body and says these are 21 projects that we anticipate that we need to address in the foreseeable near future, we're asking the legislature and the people of Guam to allow for borrowing up to $110 million in cash. Of the 21 projects, right now, you're saying that 1 project is going to absorb the entire amount. So my question then is, where is the planning and the cost association with the 21 item request? Because to me, if you say, legislature, people of Guam, we have 21 items that we want to fund by going out into the bond market, acquiring $110 million, and then the actual cost that comes in, and we're talking 32nd Guam legislature, not even 3 years, 2.5 years later, the actual cost would only fund one project out of the list of 21. So where is the planning? Well, can I pose that question to
Sure, that's a fair question. But
Mr. Ada, if I can pose that question to the Transportation Management Group, because if they're planning all of these activities, and if in fact the 21 items were included, and we're only able to finance one of those items with the bond proceeds, then there's a real question about the management and the estimates that are being provided to this body and to the community in terms of how much it would cost for either the 21 projects. We understand about escalation of costs, but can I ask where the planning came into this entire situation where something that could have financed 21 items in the bond market is only financing one item?
Okay, if I may, before that question is answered by TMG, or if you want a response for them, if I could make some clarification. We have completed several projects within the 21 prior to even engaging the third floor corridor. Because again, our government estimate on that was, as we identified to the legislature, was at 60 million, give or take. So we actually engaged, I believe, 4 or 5 projects from the 21 and completed those prior to awarding the third floor corridor. Again, there were several variables because of the timeline that we wanted for the completion.
Okay, now that you provided that explanation, Mr. Strata, can I hear from TMG, please?
Sure.
Because you're saying $60 million was the initial estimate when this discussion took place with this legislature in terms of how much the third floor corridor would cost. And then from a $60 million figure to a $97 million figure. My question is, why $37 million variance? And TMG, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response to the escalated costs of the third floor international arrivals corridor, as Mr. Ada stated, this was the priority one of the priority one projects. We've actually completed approximately 6 items from the initial 21, and we are in the process of working with additional projects aside from the third floor project that are already underway, which includes several other projects such as a security screening. We completed the hold baggage portion. We are looking at we're doing the parking lot reconfiguration due to the potential Route 10A expansion and some other projects. The ancillary projects that we had deferred these projects were deferred. They were suspended due to funding availability due to the third floor project. One of the reasons why the third floor project came in at a much higher cost, of course, the initial estimate was based on a $70 million government estimate, which was back in 2012, prior to us proceeding with the information or invitation for bid. As you know, between 2012 and up to 2016, we had some issues. Part of that was the escalated cost of the steel, which is a commodity. Another part of that was attributed to the H2 workers. It's been an issue, and so that was one of the major costs.
Let me ask this question first. I'm sorry, Mr. Topaz, for interjecting, but there's a few trains of thought that you incorporate into this overall conversation. So you said out of the list of 21 items, 6 have been completed.
Yes, sir.
And then the follow-on statement was that the third floor corridor is going to cost approximately, in totality, $110 million. So where did the funding for the other 5 projects come from?
So the bond projects are part of, there's several funding sources. They came from the bond itself. They came from our grants through the FAA and other federal...
Can you identify those funding sources, please?
Excuse me?
Can you identify those funding sources?
Yes, sir. It's from the Federal Aviation Administration, as well as the Transportation Security.
The amounts and what project?
Okay.
Please, I'm sorry.
Did you want me to go through the list?
Yes, please.
All right. So
I need our people to understand where these resources, where is the money going?
Yes.
And how they're being expended. So if we're talking about $110 million, $97 million is dedicated towards the third floor, initially as the quoted price with an escalated overall cost of $110 million. 5 other projects have already been completed out of that list. So can you identify the funding sources?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So we'll go down in priority. So the priority 1 project was International Arrivals Corridor with seismic upgrades. The initial project estimate was $70.9 million. We were authorized by the Federal Aviation Administration to receive anywhere from $14.5 to $15 million. We had bond proceeds assigned to that or projected for that particular project at $15 million. And so that particular project was estimated at $70.9 million. Due to the fact that the escalated costs attributed to the increase in the labor costs.
Let's get back to, I'm sorry, Mr. Topaz, we'll get back to that particular issue. But can we go down the list of 5 other items?
Okay. The second priority project was the hold baggage screening relocation. That came in at a cost of $30.2 million. We received approximately $25 million from the Transportation Security. We received about $26 million from the TSA, and the additional $4 million was funded partially from bond proceeds as well as from our capital improvement fund. Our security screen improvements was estimated at $3.1 million, and this was used entirely by bond proceeds, and so a percentage of that, of the bond proceeds was used, and the remaining portion of this project is going to be completed using CIP and other funding sources that we can identify with our stakeholders, which includes our signatory airlines, as well as we're hoping that TSA will come in and assist us in funding.
This is an ongoing project?
Yes, sir.
And your total estimated cost is $3.1 million. How much is originating from the bond?
We estimated the whole amount to be originating from the bond.
Okay. Next project?
The flight information display system, replacement of all of our old signage that was digitized. We transferred it into multimedia type of settings to achieve more efficiencies in terms of change of flight notifications throughout the airport, as well as to use it for other commercial purposes. That was estimated project cost of $4 million. We completed the project at $3.6 million. And so there are some cost savings associated with that. The integrated passenger loading...
bond proceeds?
Yes, sir.
Solely? Okay.
The integrated passenger loading bridge, there are several bridges that we are working to refurbish, and we actually had to replace one, which is Gate 21. That initial program cost $7.2 million. And of the bond proceeds, we had utilized $1.4 million to complete that particular project, which was a replacement of Gate 21. Our common use check-in facilities.
So your passenger loading bridge, your total estimated cost came to $7.2 million, of which 1.4 originated from the bond?
That's correct.
Okay, so where did the remaining balance originate from?
It was held in our bond proceeds.
I'm sorry?
It was held in our bond fund.
So 7.2, 1.4 originated from where?
The 1.4 was from our bond proceeds.
Okay. So where did the balance come in from?
We haven't completed the rest of the passenger loading bridges. They're in usable condition right now. We have a preventive maintenance program with an agreement through the end users, which is United. And they maintain our passenger loading bridges as part of our agreement. And so the 1.4 was utilized just for the replacement of Gate 21, which was damaged in our latest typhoon. And so the remaining portion of the bond proceeds was to be utilized for additional replacement or refurbishments of the other 16 loading bridges that we have at the airport.
And that's the balance of the bond proceeds out of the 7.2?
Yes.
Okay.
The common use check-in facilities, these are check-in facilities that are utilized primarily by our low-cost carriers that have come in to the island over the last several years. And so we have budgeted $2.8 million for that, and $2.7 was the total budget that we utilized for that particular project.
Funding source?
Bond proceeds. The fuel system improvements included improvements to our facilities up at our fuel farm. The project cost for that was $1 million. Our bond proceeds funded $794,000 to complete that particular project. Our parking expansion facility, that was estimated at $7.4 million. $6 million of that would be attributed to bond proceeds. This project we're in the design portion of the project, and we have not expended the entire 7.4 as we are awaiting additional design information as part of the 10A expansion.
So okay, so that completes the ongoing projects, the list of 5 other items that are utilizing bond proceeds.
Not quite, Senator. I'm still going down the list.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, is there any way we can get a copy of that listing? I'm going to run out of ink before we even get done, and I'd like to see the list so as you're communicating in order to generate the questions towards the management, if we could, please.
Yeah, can we get a copy?
This is a dated copy, but most of the information is still accurate. I can...
We just want to make sure that the members are following your presentation in terms of the overall information.
You know, Mr. Chairman, I apologize we didn't bring copies, but just for situational awareness, on our monthly board meetings, we actually go through this, the entire list on a monthly basis since we came back from the bond market. So it's all for public consumption. It has been for public consumption.
We're going to take a 1-minute recess until copies are provided to the senators. Okay, please.
Thank you.
This oversight hearing is hereby reconvened. We did have a representative from TMG, Transportation Management Group, working directly with the Airport Authority, responding to questions in regards to the $110 million that was allocated through Public Law 32-62 for an extensive list of approximately 22 projects, and he was highlighting the initial expenditure or allocation of bond proceeds to 5 other projects other than the third floor corridor. So, Mr. Topaz, you're recognized. And one of the first questions I would like to ask before I allow you to continue is, do you have a dated, a most current listing of projects, application of bond proceeds, and funding sources?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do, and I apologize. I had thought it was in my packet that I brought with me this morning. So this is a dated listing, but the amounts are very similar because a lot of our projects have been deferred to ensure that we had funding set aside for the.
So what I'm looking at, Mr. Topaz, is that you have a dated list as of December 14, 2016, when the numbers came in for the third floor corridor, and the initial listing of 5 or 6 items that you shared with us that bond proceeds were applied. Now, as that number dwindles, wouldn't it be appropriate to have a more current listing of how much the anticipated balance is of bond proceeds and which other projects the airport can continue to keep on its radar until certain projects are complete? So my question now is, why are you not working off of a current listing rather than December 2016?
As I mentioned, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I have the current listing. I just didn't, it was in a different folder, and I grabbed a folder that I thought had it. I didn't anticipate that we had needed it because the agenda didn't reflect that we were going to go over the bond proceeds, and so I didn't bring that with me.
Okay, so then let me ask you, based on ongoing projects, you've already highlighted the holding baggage. You highlighted the third floor corridor. You mentioned the screening, the flight information display, the passenger loading bridge, the economy check-in facilities, and then the fuel system improvements, and then the projected park expansion. With all of the allocation, if the initial quote for the third floor corridor is $97 million, and you only have $110 million, so even the parking expansion, your projected cost is $6.4 million, and then you had 3.6 for the flight information display, and 1.4 for the passenger loading. And you know where I'm going with this question. Economy check-in to absorb $2.7 million from the bond proceeds. So you're really more or less down to $3 to $4 million of the $110 million bond proceeds that was acquired through Public Law 32-62. So there's no need to go through this extensive list of want-to-do items unless you're going to be providing information from another funding source other than the bond proceeds, because the question right now is the bond proceeds and how it's being applied. So based on that, now my question is, your initial cost for the third floor corridor, international arrival at the airport, was $70.9 million. From $70.9 million to $97 million, which was the quote that came in from the contractor. My question is, why such a significant variance?
So,
Mr. Chairman, if I can answer the question. Again, like we mentioned earlier, with regards to that third floor project, there was some aggressive timelines with regards to...
Okay, let me ask, in terms of specifics, the contracting manager for these projects, is it, you oversee it, but is it the planning group, the transportation management group? Who has the complete information and knowledge and specifics about some of these projects? Is it yourself or is it TMG?
It's a shared responsibility.
I understand it's shared because they're servicing GIAA as a management group. But then that's where my line of question comes in. If TMG is the one overseeing these projects, then I would like to see TMG provide the responses.
So Mr. Chairman, the initial cost estimate of $70.9 million had come in as part of our master plan update back in 2012 that was prepared by Parsons Transportation Group as part of our airport master plan. That was the initial cost at that time in 2012. Due to several variables and variances that and events that had transpired between 2012 and 2016 when we actually did the actual opening of the bid, several things had transpired. Most notably was the H-2 visa waiver program, and what that had impacted us significantly because it included premium charges in labor force as well as escalated costs in terms of our commodities such as our steel beams that are needed for the seismic upgrades. And so there's really not just one element, Mr. Chairman, that had escalated this cost. There were several different variables that were beyond our control in terms of this process. And so when we saw initially that the initial bid came in at over 60, almost 62% over what was estimated, we knew that we would be remiss in our duties if we were to proceed with that particular project at that particular time. Given those circumstances, we decided as a team to come back in, regroup, look at the project from a different angle, and break it down into phases to ensure that the authority can proceed with proceeding with this unfunded federal mandate, to proceed with the projects as funding became available. A good portion of these projects were funded through the bond proceeds, as well as through the FAA, as well as through our capital improvement funds.
Okay, so let's go ahead and proceed now with all of the anticipated costs, inclusive of the third floor, because that's a requirement for security purposes. So I'm not questioning the projects and how they were prioritized. I'm questioning the variance in terms of the $70.9 million. Now it's a $26 million increase. Whether we want to blame it on H-2 workers, because that's one of the key questions I'm aware of, that black construction does not, a significant portion, and I'm saying a very significant portion of their workforce is not inclusive of H-2 workers. So the escalated cost in steel is understood. The escalated cost, natural cost of construction workers is understood considering the climate, but a $27 million variance is quite excessive considering the timeline. 2012, 2017, 5 years later. Now let me, so let me ask you the question then, Chuck, or Mr. Rada in this case. So what is the plan to move forward?
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I can go back to the timelines you mentioned, because that is a significant part of the cost as well. Again, I was trying to explain earlier with regards to the aggressive timelines that we wanted to place on the project. We wanted to shorten the timeline because, again, the construction to our operation greatly impacts our ability to mobilize, or maximize gate operations. So we actually are working with the contractor to ensure that we only have one gate down at a time, and that can be anywhere from 3 to 4 months. So during the process when we put it out for bid, I can't even recall the exact timeline, but we had to extend the closing date because we had a tremendous amount of RFIs, or requests for information, with regards to the project and the timelines and the security that was involved with vetting these employees and the amount of employees they need to, to work on this project, again with the tight timelines. This is not a traditional, construction project where it's, cut the ribbon or break the dirt, then, you move forward. There's a lot of federal regulations that are involved. There are a lot of windows of opportunities for them to operate. Again, we're running an airport with last year alone at 59,500 flights. So working within the peak periods of our airport was a significant concern with regards to the cost for the project. So again, that's something that, even with airport planning and the current vendors, you can't really pinpoint until, they start putting the pen to paper. And again, both times we put it out to bid, Mr. Chairman, there was a tremendous amount of, requests for information, and a lot of that had to do with the security portion because there was additional costs associated with that. And understanding
that, and in terms of putting a request to the legislative body and before the community, I would think that most of that, those items, concerns in terms of the third floor expansion, in terms of ensuring that some of these facilities, well, the entire facility continues to provide the service that is providing our community, and albeit with minimal disruption from any construction. That should have been part of the overall planning process. So to say that there are a number of deviations that have affected it, maybe 1, 2, or 3, but if you're starting to expand that list, then it comes back to me is, did we do the proper planning to come up with the initial estimate? $70.9 million, this is our estimate, but because of some of these other variations, it will increase because of security purposes and others.
Mr. Chairman, I actually believe we did proper planning, because you got to remember that was a 2013 bond market, and it's 2017 today. $70.9 million to a $97 million request. That's a major variance. And how do, okay, my question now is, with the TSA, because getting back to the TSA checkpoint, what are the plans moving forward? It's $1.6 million. Yes, $1.6 million, which is nothing compared to the 97 for construction, or actually the 110 all in for the third floor corridor. We already are at what, 35% of the conceptual design, and we're moving forward with regards to anticipated dates of completion. We're working with the airlines. We've had positive, discussions with those folks, and unfortunately, I'm not able to go into details right now, as again, they're still in discussion. We are still in discussions with them, but we're very positive, and we look forward to moving the project forward.
A general question then. When was the last time that communication with TSA representatives occurred?
Well, Senator, first off, I'd like to just acknowledge for the record that, there was miscommunication a while ago, with regards to employees with TSA. And, unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation,
Okay.
On this island, we know grows legs and takes off.
My question, Mr. Adam, my line of question is, when was the last time you had a discussion with TSA representatives?
Last week. Last week. I mean, we've met with, they have their, and I apologize, it's a really long title, but they had their Hawaii representative out here that we just had discussions with, well, I take that back, a week and a half ago. And we walked through all the projects and talked in great detail with regards to the third floor project and the other project. Because I remember, I don't know if you recall, I mentioned earlier there was 3 projects of priority with TSA.
So you're saying during that conversation a week and a half ago that TSA checkpoints was part of that conversation?
Absolutely.
And they were given an update?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Enough said. Only because my last communication with certain individuals was within 2 weeks. So you had a subsequent discussion on the TSA checkpoint. Now they understand the projected timeline. They understand that, in fact, the airport is at 35% design and that you're still pressing forward. Where would you be able to identify the proceeds for the completion?
Again, I mentioned earlier that we're in discussions with some of our airline partners, to see if we can, again, have a joint partnership with this particular project.
Okay. And I have to also add, Mr. Ada, that certainly the committee recognizes not only the $97 million project that is ongoing, that was just recently given out to a contractor, but there are other ongoing projects that have been completed. And I'm focusing on TSA checkpoints because on the one hand, we're building a third floor corridor that would accommodate all of our travelers, reduce the congestion on the second floor and on the first. And while we're building that, on the other hand, we have other entities, inclusive of the airport, that are working on a 2020 plan of 2 million visitors. And then here we have a congested area. And it's a TSA checkpoint. What are we doing to be able to complete that, provide expanded services so that the congestion can be relieved to a great extent? So you already provided the information. 35% complete with design. Projected completion of the design will be summer of 2000 and next year?
18. That's correct.
Summer,
but Mr. Chairman, I do want to share that it is a challenge with any airport within the country with regards to immigrations coming in and TSA and going out. A lot of the airport sponsors throughout the country have shared the concern with the federal administration and actually been advocating for an increase for funding to resolve these items. We're hoping that, with the Trump administration's Rebuild America, we'll see some of that funding. There was an increase with regards to funding for manpower to the U.S. CBP, but unfortunately in our discussions with them in D.C., it's focused on the land agents, which, as we all know, the president, wanted to build a wall between, Mexico and the United States. that's where a lot of the funding is going to. We're hopeful that a lot of the funding, well, not a lot, well, some of the funding will be shifted to both personnel and facilities as well, so we can see some of that. We are very grateful to this TSA with regards to the security screening checkpoint expansion, because they've offered the machines to actually operate those 2 additional lanes. So all we have to focus on is on the construction piece.
Well, let me close discussion on this, and Mr. Topaz, thank you, and Mr. Ada for your responses. You all know that there's been information disseminated to TSA officials, and we're not I'm not speaking on behalf of TSA, and I certainly hope the airport is not able to speak on behalf of TSA, but there's been notification that 40 of our TSA personnel will be terminated in Guam, considering certain factors, whether it's originating from the federal administration or from Congress, and that's why the question and the emphasis is on the TSA checkpoints, because if we're able to accommodate the additional request of 2 checkpoints, then that could lead to saving these jobs on island. And that's why I'm trying to hit home a point that if TSA inquires, what is the status of this, well, they're discussing the termination of 40 of our people, and that those 2 additional TSA checkpoints are completed, then they could conceivably, and airport officials could fight to keep these TSA officials on island to accommodate the increased visitorship. And that's why this is an issue that is hitting home with me, because we're talking about the 40 TSA individuals, whether it eventually is downsized to 20 or whatever the number may be. It's about saving the jobs of these good-paying individuals who are providing a critical service to our community and to our visitor industry and to all of our travelers. So we're gonna press forward with the.
But Mr. Chairman, if I could add to that, I totally agree with your concern for that particular matter. But I have to say that from my vantage point, that is the furthest from the truth. With regards to our inline baggage system expansion, that actually required 40 additional TSA employees to man that. Again, that system, which was done completely, recently completed. That was over 30 million.
Please, I'm going to ask you not to go there. Because if you're asking that, in fact, my source is incorrect, then you're questioning the integrity of the chairman with regards to the possible loss of up to 40 TSA officials.
I'm just sharing. I'm sharing from my vantage point, sir.
I understand, Mr. Allen. But let's end this conversation here, because, like I said a little earlier, if the additional TSA checkpoints are constructed, there is good argument with the increased visitorship.
Absolutely, I agree.
So let me open the floor to the other senators, just on the TSA checkpoint expansion and design. Senators, any questions or comments?
Mr. Ada, I've been reading the newspaper, and it's quite obvious that just recently the TSA representative from D.C. has basically drowned out the statement that was on the Daily Post about the 40 positions. It's true attrition, and it's not like we're going to lose 40 people tomorrow. That's not even possible in the federal government. They don't do that. If they do that, it's called a RIF. But they're not doing that. It's on the newspaper. It's true attrition. Mr. Melendez came out from TSA and stated that's what's going to happen. But my concern really is, what is the relationship?
Let me just clarify. I understand, Senator San Agustin, that you're alluding to that, but the direct communication that I have before me states, I do caution the airport authority that my staffing has been impacted with the new DHS, and I lost 40 FTEs, and that will impact the checkpoint operation. So downsizing, whatever we want to call it, 40 FTEs, 40 of our people losing their jobs or being reassigned elsewhere is going to impact the congestion at the TSA checkpoints. That's what I'm saying. Save the jobs, allow for the congestion to be relieved. Let's take care of our travelers so that, in fact, they don't have to wait 2 hours in line or an hour and a half. So that's not a number that was fabricated, and that's why I said, please don't go there.
Okay, I'm not going to go there, but my question is going to lead to is, number one is, what is the relationship with the airport and TSA? If I'm correct, TSA can actually close the airport, am I correct? if the federal requirements are not met by the airport? Is that a yes or a no, or they can or they can't?
That is correct. The transportation.
So just being that the answer is yes, then I would go now to the relationship. If TSA states these are the requirements to keep the airport open, I'm going to safely assume that the list of projects you have would have been in support of TSA requirements. Am I correct?
TSA, USCBP, and FAA as well.
All the federal agency.
That's correct.
Now, as I'm looking at your listing, and as how the Transportation Management Group have stated, are all these projects that has been accomplished, are these in support? Is every one of the projects in support of the federal agency's requirements?
Yes, yes, Senator. These.
No, is every one of them is in support of a federal agency requirement? Like the road expansion. The federal government said expand the road so we can get more people in there or get people out. I'm trying to understand that. I don't see that. So
yeah. So with regards to, I can't really speak towards the roadway issues, but with regards to any of the airport expansion projects or any of the capital improvement projects, these projects, depending on which federal agencies are oversight, whether it's security or not, we have to send these projects to them for them to review and for them to give us their stamp of approval in order for us to proceed with the projects itself.
The only reason I'm asking these questions is I wanted to make sure that here in Guam, we're doing our part to keep our airport open, to keep all federal employees, everybody employed, okay? And that's my concern. I wanted to make sure that when you mentioned you're upgrading the digital screen, I don't know who you're keeping employed, the digital screen, somebody types it in, it goes on the screen like we do here. And that's $1 million. That may be $1 million you could speed up whatever project you got. When you identified it started in 2012, it's now 2017. 5 years later, now we're talking about H2. H2 only happened a couple of years ago. It didn't happen in 2012. I don't think we had that crisis in 2012 about the H2 workers. Am I correct?
You're correct.
And did we have that crisis in 2013?
No, we didn't.
Did we have the crisis in 2014?
No, we didn't.
Boom. Thank you very much.
Yeah. But we didn't open the invitation for bid until 2016.
And that's what worries me, okay? If you started on 2012, I can understand a year later maybe, you know, after you get all the paperwork going, you have the bid. But 12, 13, 14, 15, 4 years later? Is that what you're saying?
A project of this magnitude, Senator, doesn't just happen overnight.
No, I understand, and I know that. But when you tell the committee here that you've got 5 projects done, I thought the priority was the corridor.
Sir, if I could,
I just don't. I want to make sure that.
But if I can help to provide clarity, again, like we mentioned with regards to the federal, stamp of approval, there was 4 federal regulatory oversight with regards to the third floor expansion. So we needed to have them review it, and it's not just reviewed at the region; it goes all the way to D.C. for all the 4 Fed families.
And it took 4 years,
sir. It's it's 4 different agencies. And there's 4 different oversights. So again, unfortunately, we don't control the turnaround time with regards to their review, their comments, and then integrating. Again, it's a juggling act basically with 4 different families.
I'm only concerned about the timetable. Okay, because,
so are we, sir.
Because as we move along on any project, it's no different what Public Works has to deal with. As they're moving along, the clock is always against the government of Guam, no matter what. We got an H2 problem now.
That's correct.
We shouldn't have had that problem 3 years ago. I mean, I would expect that the corridor would have started, if it was 2012, 2014, at least start. I mean, you had a project. You just completed one project up at the airport recently.
I'm sorry?
You just completed a project up at the airport recently.
Yes, sir.
Where Black Construction or some company was there, and they're doing all kinds of demolition, and then they completed, and it was less than a year. And I don't know what that project is. I'm gonna.
The recent completed project was inline baggage system, but again,
the baggage system.
Yes, sir. Okay. But again, with the review and approval from 4 different federal families, trying to juggle that, then I do want to bring back the challenge that we have with the vendors, with the request for information. I mean, that alone was almost a year in giving them responses back, the back and forth.
Mr. Adam, I'm looking at the number 4. Let's minus 1. We're down to 3. How long did it take a federal agency to respond? 2? 3? I'm just concerned. There's got to be a sense of urgency. You got a bond. You're moving with money. You're dealing with time. You're paying for the bond. Use it or not, you're paying for it. And there's no urgency. It doesn't carry. It doesn't sit too well with me. You know what I mean? And I'm just concerned about that. If there's no sense in urgency when you borrow, and the people of Guam are looking at this and hoping for the improvement. So pretty soon it'll be 10 years and you're still not done. The administration's changed. Everything has changed. Maybe we'll have a bunch of H2. Maybe the 97 will become 50-something. I'm just trying to understand. Maybe there won't be any money because you used up all your money paying the bond.
So not even close, sir.
I just want to make sure, okay?
Yeah. So just in response to your question, Senator, when we went out to the bonds back in 2013, we didn't have the design done. A design of this magnitude takes 18 months to 2 years to complete before we can proceed with preparing the invitation for bid. And at a cost of approximately almost $4 million,
which we didn't have.
We didn't have at that time.
Well, then it worries me when you go to the bond and you come for the legislature, and you ask, I need 110 million, but I don't know what I'm going to build. But I need 100. Yeah. I'm just saying that, and that's the picture I'm getting now. So I'm looking at this, sir, and I'm just saying is that. Then now I know that when any agency comes here and they tell me they want a bond, if they don't have a picture drawn, then I'm not even going to entertain it. Okay, so I just give you fair warning, and it's only fair to the people of Guam that if you come and you don't draw me a picture, but you want a bunch of money, it's not going to work.
Yep. So if I could just go through the timeline so you have a better understanding of what these timelines were and why we got to this point here in time. In 2012, our master plan was updated by Parsons. It anticipated that the cost of a third-floor arrivals corridor was going to be $70.9 million.
Okay.
Right? So we used that master plan to go out to the bond market in 2013 when our bonds were callable, where we were able to finance it. We got that approved late in 2013. So once that approval was granted, or once the bonds were received, we started the planning process for the architecture and engineering portion of the third floor project. Again, that took over 18 months to complete because there's a lot of information that has to be put into that particular design. Correct. So fast forward that puts us into 2015. Once that was prepared, we had to prepare all the specs for the invitation for bid that had to be reviewed and approved by the 4 regulatory agencies. And then from there, once we got that approval, we were able to go out, publish for the invitation for bid. The invitation for bid went out in 2015. It was supposed to be opened in November of 2015. We couldn't, due to the numerous RFIs that had come in, we had delayed the opening of the bid to February 2016. When we opened the bid in February 2016, the price came in at over 60% what the estimated cost was. Mm-hmm. And so we regrouped and said, we can't afford to proceed with this particular project because it was over budget. So we went back into the planning process, and now we were dealing with the H-2 visas and all these other issues that we came into play. That's where the other unknowns with regards to the project had come into play. The security issues, all these different things. A lot of the contractors had anticipated that 30% of their productive time was going to be spent just being vetted through security. And no matter how many times we tried to assure them, no matter how many times the TSA came in to tell them, no, we have a different process, it didn't happen that way. But you understand the procurement process better than I do because you're more experienced at it. When the invitation for bid was issued out and the bids came in, we had to go with the lowest, most responsive bidder, which was Black Construction. They came in at a premium cost because now in 2016, that's where the H-2 visa waiver issues started to come from. Right. So Black Construction was one of the only construction companies on Guam that had a local labor force able to accommodate this project. But because of the fact that it's a local labor force, they were to be paid premium pricing for for this particular project, which escalated that process, and along with the steel commodities and the cost of transportation to bring those large bulky items into Guam. So again, that's what we were trying to explain. It wasn't just we got the money and we're supposed to go and build it. There was a process in this whole project. And we're proceeding with the project because we wanted to condense the timelines to minimize the impact on our vendors, on our operators at the airport. That was another cost that probably escalated our labor costs. But we understood that, and we knew that going into this project, it was going to be a costly project. This is probably the single most largest project in the history of Guam, next to the expansion of the airport back in 1998 with $241 million. And so we couldn't just arbitrarily go out and say, okay, you know what, you're the lowest bidder at $112 million, we're going to award it to you. That was way over our budget. We said, let's go back and figure out, break this up into pieces so that we can do what we can afford to do to meet the federal mandate. And that's what we're doing, Senator. That's all we're doing, is to ensure that we can meet that unfunded federal mandate that was imposed upon us due to 9/11. And so we've been working with them since 2004 to figure out a more cost-effective way to manage this process. So that's why I know it's easy to just look and say, oh, we're already 4 years into this thing and you still don't have a corridor. There's more than just putting brick and mortar and cement up and letting it go. There's a lot of moving parts into this process.
Yes, I understand where you come from, but I wanted to make sure that I express my disappointment, okay? And at the same time, what you've explained to us is maybe this is a lesson learned for everybody else in the government. When they're going to go for a bond, maybe they need to tack on a 25 or 30% increase to what they anticipate because of the unforeseen costs associated to the bidding process. Because basically what you're telling us is exactly a pretty good explanation of all the delay and the costs that is, it's skyrocketed. And it'll probably continue to skyrocket until, we don't know. We don't know yet until the president lifts all his ban and lets all the H2 start coming in so we can offset, or GCC starts promoting more folks, but still, whatever it's going to cost, it's going to cost. And as the clock ticks, it's just costing us more money. We're not saving a penny.
Understood. Senator, and I hope it makes you feel better. We just met with the rating agencies, and they maintained. We're advocating for an upgrade with our bonds. We'll see where that's going to come from, but they totally understand with regards to timelines, and they're very pleased for where we're at with regards to the bond proceeds and the projects associated with it.
Yeah, and we just hope in 6 months we'll be able to keep all 40 TSA employees that are being considered for movement or whatever they plan on doing. Thank you.
Well, Senator, the expansion or the third floor corridor actually will require more TSA personnel because part of the transit business. So,
but that'll be on your court.
Yes,
you worry about that with TSA and whoever you need to worry about. We'll watch and hope for the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator San Augustine. Speaker Cruz.
There was one part I didn't understand. I'm really not part of the committee, so I'm just sitting off to the side ex officio. But I'm just wondering, every construction worker that's going to be up on the third floor has to be cleared by TSA before they can get to the construction project, right?
That is correct, sir.
Is that the part of the delay that you were talking about, that everybody who's going to work on this project needs to be cleared?
Well, across the country, we actually have the screening process, the vetting of employees or any stakeholder that wants to work at the airport, processed through our airport police division, but the database that is vetted through is run by the federal government. There was there is problems across the country with regards to the amount of the turnaround time of the vetting process. So that was a concern, and we're still working with the contractor to make sure that we get all the folks, because again, it's going to build up as the project increases. Right now, they're just doing demo on the first portion of the first pod being built. But again, that labor force is going to increase. But we've been working with them to get the names in or their personnel in so we can start that vetting process. But again, we don't control the turnaround time with regards to the approval process.
And the initial bid for this went out over 2 years ago, correct?
That's correct. It was announced in 2015.
I thought I remembered that because I was talking to some companies in the States that were going to be subcontractors to a bid that was coming in for the cranes and for the steel. And so but what happened to that first bid?
Again, sir, there was a lengthy process before we can actually even open the bids with the amount of RFIs, requests for information about the project. And I'm surprised, I can't remember the length of time offhand, but it seemed like almost 10 months or close to 10 months. And then when it finally came in, like Mr. Tupaz indicated earlier, it was way beyond our government estimate for that particular project, so we had to bring that back in.
And so how are you planning on being able to fund this project if it goes, if the bid is now at 110? Where's this additional money coming from?
Well, we've committed, our FA entitlements, for the up until 2020 to assist with the funding of this particular project.
Okay, you're not thinking about going back out to the bond market?
No, sir.
Okay, because I was just wondering, because that article about your bond rating also stated that you guys are have too many outstanding debts.
Well, actually, we're way below with regards to our debt service ratio. And again, that's why we're advocating for an upgrade in our bond rating, because the airport's at its most financially sound position that it's ever been since the existence of the airport.
It would have seemed to me, but I was just wondering about that article the other day. I thought it said that the bonding agency was concerned about the large amount of debt that you guys were carrying.
The bond rating agencies, Mr. Chairman, are always concerned with the amount of debt that we carry, and that's one of their that's one of the points that they look at. But we have, when we proceeded with the IFB, we had enough funds to certify the project so that we can proceed with the project as the costs that come in.
I'm not as familiar with the airport operations, but I'm getting the impression that had we completed the second TSA clearing section, we wouldn't completed the construction of it. We wouldn't be having this issue with TSA currently. Is that still out and incomplete?
So the TSA security checkpoint was one of the projects that we had identified, Mr. Chairman, and it was a project that we have been working with the TSA to proceed with. But again, it was based on our current passenger activity. With the increase in airline activity from Korea, we didn't anticipate that we were going to get these many passengers, and so the TSA, that's what's driving the TSA security checkpoint to be to move forward immediately. And so we've gone back in.
Where was that going to be located in the current airport?